Stop scrolling. Something is about to be released over your life, and I need you to receive it fully. Not halfway, not with one ear still on the noise of your day fully. Because what is rising in you right now is not ordinary encouragement. It is a reward, a specific, deliberate, long-prepared reward that the world has not seen operate through a life the way it is about to operate through yours. My child, I know you have wondered. In the quiet moments when no one was watching, whether the waiting would ever end, whether the silence meant I had forgotten you, whether the long season of carrying weight without explanation was punishment or oversight or simply bad timing. I am answering that question now directly, so there is no more wondering. It was none of those things. It was preparation, and the preparation is complete. 1 Corinthians 2-9 says, "Eye has not seen nor ear heard the things which God has prepared for those who love him, my child." That verse is not a poetic exaggeration. It is a precise description of what is about to unfold in your life. What is coming was never visible to you because it was never meant to be predicted. It was meant to be revealed. If something in your body responded just now before your mind had time to evaluate what I am saying, a tightening, a stillness, a sudden attentiveness, do not brush past it. That is not coincidence. That is your spirit recognizing the weight of what is being spoken over you. You were meant to receive this today. I want to tell you why this message found you specifically today, and not last month, and not next month. Timing in my kingdom is never arbitrary. There is a reason the algorithm placed this in front of you at this exact hour. A reason your attention slowed down on these words instead of scrolling past them the way you scroll past most things. You are at a threshold. Something in your circumstances or in your spirit has reached a point of readiness that made this the appointed moment for this specific word to land. You may not be able to name what shifted. You may only sense that something in you has been different in recent days. More attentive, more aware that change is somewhere close. That awareness is not random. It is the readiness I am describing arriving in you exactly on schedule. Type, "I am ready to receive this, my child." I want to speak to you about the hiding, because I know it did not feel like preparation while you were living inside it. It felt like being passed over. It felt like watching others rise while you stayed in the same place, faithful and unseen. Asking quietly why your obedience was not producing the movement theirs seemed to produce so easily. But you were never overlooked. You were reserved. There is a difference between rejection and reservation that most people never learn to see from inside their own waiting. Rejection says, you were not chosen. Reservation says you were chosen for something specific, and that specific thing required a kind of readiness that cannot be rushed. I was not withholding from you. I was guarding what I was forming. I do not hurry what I intend to last. You were not called to rise with the crowd. You carried something too weighted to be released before you could carry it without it crushing you or corrupting you. So I kept you hidden the way a seed is kept hidden in the ground before it breaks the surface. The way gold is kept in the fire before it is ever worn. The way a sealed scroll waits for the appointed hour before it is opened. Not because you were less, because you were being prepared for more than the people around you could see. That hiddenness is ending now. Not because you finally did enough to earn the unveiling, because the unveiling was always coming. On a timeline I set before you were born, and the timeline has arrived. I want to walk you through what the hidden season actually accomplished, because I do not think you have given yourself credit for what was built in you during the years that felt like nothing was happening. While you waited, you developed a depth of character that cannot be manufactured under easier conditions. Anyone can appear faithful when faithfulness costs nothing. Anyone can appear patient when patience is not actually being tested. But you were faithful when faithfulness produced no visible return. You were patient when patience felt indistinguishable from being forgotten. That kind of character is not built in seasons of ease. It is built specifically in the hidden place, under specifically prolonged pressure, in specifically prolonged silence. Think of what you learned that you could not have learned any other way. You learned to recognize my voice apart from the noise of circumstantial confirmation, because circumstances were not confirming anything for a long time, and you still kept listening. You learned to find peace that was not contingent on visible progress, because visible progress was not available to you. and you had to discover whether peace could exist without it. You learned to separate your sense of worth from other people's recognition, because recognition was not coming, and you had to find out whether you could still believe you mattered without it. Every one of those lessons required the hiding. None of them could have been learned in the light. And here is what I want you to understand about the people who rose faster than you during that season. Many of them rose on foundations that could not bear long-term weight, because they never went through what you went through. They built quickly because they were never required to build slowly, and quick building, while it looks impressive in the moment, often cannot hold what is placed on top of it later. You, my child, were building slowly because what I intended to place on your foundation eventually required a foundation that slow building alone can produce. I was not punishing you with the slowness. I was qualifying you for the weight. Jeremiah 1-5 says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, my child." That means the reward I am releasing over your life was never an improvised response to your good behavior. It was written into the plan before you existed. You did not earn your way into this moment. You grew into readiness for a moment that was already reserved for you. Think about what that means for every version of yourself you have ever felt embarrassed by. The version that made decisions out of fear instead of faith. The version that stayed too long in situations that were clearly not aligned with what I had spoken over you. The version that doubted, that complained, that nearly gave up more than once. I knew that version before you were born too. None of it disqualified you. None of it surprised me. I was not waiting for a flawless version of you to show up before I started preparing this reward. I was working with the actual version of you. The imperfect, struggling, very human version. The entire time. The reward is not a verdict that you finally became good enough. It is the fruit of a relationship that survived every version of you, including the ones you are least proud of. If you have been in this message with me from the beginning, staying present through every word instead of skimming for the parts that felt good, I want you to know that staying is part of what readiness looks like. Subscribe to this channel now, my child, so that what I continue to release in this season does not pass you by. There is more coming, and I want you positioned to receive every word of it the moment it is spoken. Type "Heaven prepared me in secret." My child, I need you to hear something clearly, because I think you have been carrying a quiet, unspoken belief that my love for you increased the longer you endured, as if your suffering earned something, as if the harder the season, the more I noticed you, the more I cared. That is not how it worked. And I want to correct it now gently, because it matters. I did not love you because you endured. I loved you while you were enduring. I was not waiting on the other side of your hardest nights to finally show up once you had proven yourself worthy of my attention. I was in the hardest nights. I was closest to you in the exact moments you believed you were barely surviving, when your prayers were more breath than words, when you could not articulate what you needed because the pain was too large for language. That is where I was, not arriving after, present during. This matters because it changes what the reward I am releasing actually means. It is not a prize for passing a test, as if I were grading your performance and only now deciding you qualify. It is the natural unfolding of a relationship that was real the entire time, even in the seasons where it did not feel like anything was happening. I was building with you in every silent hour. I was recording every tear that fell with no witness but me. And now what was built in private is becoming visible. My daughter, I want you to release the belief that you had to suffer enough to deserve this. You did not earn this through pain. You received this through relationship, through staying connected to me when staying connected made no logical sense given what you were facing. That is different from earning. That is intimacy. And intimacy is what produced what is about to be released. I want to tell you something about how I experienced your hardest seasons, because I think you have only ever considered them from your side, never from mine when you were breaking. I felt the breaking. When you cried in a room with the door closed, certain no one could hear you. I heard every sound, and I was not distant from the sound. I was inside the room with you, close enough that if you could have seen into the spiritual dimension in that moment, you would have seen me there. Not observing from a comfortable distance but present in the actual texture of your pain, carrying what you could not carry alone even when you felt entirely alone. This is not how some have taught you to think about suffering. Some have taught that pain is a sign of my absence, that if I were truly present, the pain would not be happening at all. But that teaching does not match how I actually work, and it does not match what you and I actually walked through together. I do not promise an absence of pain. I promise a presence within it, and the presence I gave you during your hardest seasons was not partial. It was not me checking in occasionally to see how you were managing. It was sustained, continuous, attentive nearness, every single day, including the days you could not feel it because the pain was too loud for you to register anything else. That nearness is what is now producing what I am releasing, not your performance under pressure. Our relationship during the pressure, the two are different, and I need you to know the difference. Because performance produces pride, but relationship produces gratitude. And gratitude is the only soil this kind of reward can be planted in without it corrupting you. Type God was closest when I felt furthest. My child, I want to explain something to you about the opposition you faced, because I do not think you have ever fully understood what was actually happening in those rooms. You kept asking during the hardest parts of that season what you had done to deserve the resistance. Why certain people pulled away without explanation. Why some turned cold the moment you started to grow. Why others judged you before you had even spoken, resisted your presence for reasons they could not articulate, treated you as a threat when you had given them no reason to feel threatened. Here is what was actually happening. They were not reacting to what you did. They were reacting to who you were becoming. Before you understood your own calling, they felt the pressure of it. Before you believed in your own purpose, they saw the glow of something they could not name. Before you had ever spoken your assignment out loud, even to yourself, your presence had already begun stirring something in the spiritual realm that registered to them as discomfort, as unease, as a vague sense that something around you was shifting in a direction they could not control. You were not yet aware of the weight you carried. They were. Their resistance was not a verdict on your worth. It was an involuntary response to an authority that had not yet been named, but was already active. Even when your voice trembled with uncertainty, your soul was already carrying weight. Even when your confidence lagged behind what I had spoken over you, your calling was already speaking, in frequencies you were not yet conscious of producing. They were not drawn to your weakness. They were disturbed by your emerging strength. And now, my child, the very thing they sensed and resisted is rising in full view. The light they tried to dim is breaking through with a force their early resistance could never have stopped, because it was never theirs to stop. It was mine to release, and I release on my timeline, not theirs. I want you to think back specifically to the moments that confused you most. The friend who suddenly grew distant for reasons they never fully explained. The family member who started finding fault with decisions they had never questioned before. The colleague who began competing with you in ways that felt disproportionate to anything you had actually done. At the time, you searched yourself for the cause. You wondered if you had changed in some way that justified their shift, if you had become arrogant or difficult, or somehow less likable. You carried that confusion as if it were evidence against you, my child. It was not evidence against you. It was evidence of you. Specifically, evidence of the part of you that was forming faster than your conscious awareness could track. Spiritual authority does not wait for permission to begin operating. It begins the moment I start releasing it, regardless of whether the person carrying it has caught up yet to what is happening inside them. You were operating with weight before you had language for the weight, and people who are themselves operating without much spiritual sensitivity will still register weight, even when they cannot identify its source. They felt something shift around you, attributed the discomfort to something you must have done, and responded with distance or competition or quiet hostility, because that is how unprocessed discomfort usually expresses itself in people who do not have the tools to name what they are actually experiencing. This is why I do not want you carrying guilt over relationships that ended or changed during that season. You did not cause their discomfort through any fault of your own. You simply became someone whose presence required a response. And not everyone is equipped to respond with curiosity instead of defensiveness. Some people, when they encounter something they cannot explain, choose to diminish it rather than examine it. That was their choice, not your failure. Release the guilt. It was never yours to carry. If this is registering in your spirit right now, something settling into place that explains years of confusion, subscribe to this channel and stay connected to what I continue to unfold. This is not the only word prepared for this season of your life type. They felt it before I understood it. My child, before I go further, I want to speak directly and without hesitation about something I am asking of you right now. I am not asking you to give from guilt. I am not asking you to give because you owe me anything. I am asking you to give because what I am releasing in this message did not arrive by accident. And the same is true for the message itself. Someone, somewhere, sowed in faith so that this word could reach you today, at the exact hour you needed it. And now I am asking you to do the same for someone else who is standing exactly where you stood, in the hidden season, wondering if the waiting will ever end. This is not a small request. I want you to take it seriously. Sowing a seed right now, in this moment, is not a transaction. It is a declaration. It is you standing in agreement with everything I have just spoken over your life and saying with action, and not just words, I believe this is real, and I am willing to put something tangible behind that belief. When you sow, you are not buying a blessing. You already have the blessing. You are participating in releasing this same word to the next person who needs to hear it exactly when they need to hear it. Do not let this moment pass without responding. Visit the link in the description below, or scan the QR code on screen, and sow what you are able to sow right now, in this exact moment, while the weight of this word is still fresh in your spirit. I am asking you directly, do not wait until later, when the urgency has faded and the moment has cooled. Respond now while heaven is moving. I know there is a voice that will try to talk you out of this. It will tell you to wait until your own circumstances improve before you give anything to anyone else. It will tell you that sowing now in the middle of your own season of need is backwards, that you should receive first and give later. Once you have more margin, once your own situation feels more secure. My child, that voice sounds reasonable, but it is not how the kingdom operates, and it is not how the testimony of every faithful soul throughout history has operated. The widow who gave her last coin did not wait until she had abundance. She gave from her lack, and that gift is remembered to this day as one of the most honored offerings ever recorded. I am not telling you to give what you do not have. I am telling you not to wait for a feeling of abundance that may never arrive before you participate in what I am doing. Sowing now, in this exact moment, while you are still in process yourself, is precisely the kind of obedience that activates what I described earlier. The acceleration, the open door, the reward that the world has not yet seen operate through a life. It is not coincidental that the people in Scripture who saw the most dramatic movements of God were consistently the ones who gave before their circumstances gave them permission to feel comfortable giving. Do not wait for comfort. Respond now in faith, and let the response itself be part of what positions you for what is coming. My child, I want to tell you about the specific nature of what is being released over your life, because I do not want you to mistake it for something generic, something anyone could receive if they simply waited long enough. What I am releasing in you is not a copy of what I have given to anyone else. It is not modeled after someone else's testimony, someone else's breakthrough, someone else's anointing. It was shaped by your exact road. No one else carried your exact weight, survived your exact betrayals, endured your exact silence, or stayed faithful through your exact specific tests. The power being released through your life now is one of one. It cannot be replicated because the furnace that produced it cannot be replicated. No one else walked through your fire in your shoes, with your wounds, choosing faithfulness in your specific dark. That is why this is being described as something the world has never seen. Not because no one has ever experienced the power of God before, many have, but because this exact configuration of endurance, discernment, compassion forged through your specific losses, and authority earned through your specific obedience has never existed before and will never exist again. When I release what is original, it does not blend into what already exists. It disrupts. It reorders rooms. People will feel something shift around you and will not be able to explain it, because what you carry now was never designed to be explained. It was designed to be experienced. This is why you never quite fit where others felt comfortable. You were not designed to fit. You were designed to carry something that requires its own space, its own authority, its own room to operate without being diminished by comparison to anyone else's path. Joseph did not fit in the house of his brothers. He was given dreams that unsettled people who could not yet see what those dreams were preparing him to carry. The same disruption you experienced was never a flaw in you. It was evidence that something original was forming, something the systems around you were never built to contain. I want to tell you what makes this reward specifically unprecedented, because the word matters and I do not use it loosely. There have been other faithful people. There have been other seasons of hidden preparation followed by visible release. What I am describing is not unprecedented because nothing like it has ever happened to anyone. It is unprecedented because the exact combination of gifts I am releasing through you has never been assembled in one vessel in quite this configuration. You carry a specific blend, the discernment that came from being deceived and having to learn to recognize deception before it fully landed again, the compassion that came from being misunderstood and choosing not to let that misunderstanding harden you, the authority that came from staying obedient in seasons where obedience produced nothing visible, and the endurance that came from surviving losses that should have, by every natural measure, ended your faith entirely. No other person carries that exact blend, formed by your exact history, calibrated to your exact assignment. This means that what you are equipped to do, you are equipped to do in a way that cannot be outsourced to someone else, cannot be replaced by someone with a similar but not identical testimony, and cannot be diminished by comparison to anyone who looks, on the surface, like they are doing something similar. There will be people whose gifts resemble yours in some ways. There will be no one whose gifts are yours. I want to say something about counterfeits, because as what is released through your life becomes more visible, you will start to notice imitation around you. People who watch what is forming in your life and try to replicate the surface of it, the language, the posture, the outward markers of what they perceive as success or anointing, without having walked through what actually produced it in you. This will not threaten what I am building. It cannot. A counterfeit can copy the appearance of something real, but it cannot copy the substance, because the substance was forged in places the counterfeit never went. Do not be unsettled by imitation. Let it pass by you without claiming your attention. What is genuine does not need to defend itself against what is fake. Genuine simply continues being genuine. And over time, the difference becomes undeniable to anyone watching closely enough to notice. There is also something I want to say about the temptation to dilute what I am building in you in order to make it more palatable to people who are not ready for the fullness of it. As this reward becomes visible, some people will want access to your light without wanting to engage with the depth that produced it. They will want the encouragement without the accountability, the peace without the obedience that peace required, the favor without the faithfulness that the favor flows from. You do not have to dilute yourself to make room for people who only want a fraction of what you carry. Stand in the fullness. Those who are ready will rise to meet you there. Those who are not ready will find their own level, and that is not your responsibility to manage. This is why comparison has always felt hollow to you, even when you tried to engage in it the way the world taught you to. Something in you always knew, even before you could articulate it, that measuring yourself against someone else's path was measuring two things that were never meant to be measured against each other. You were not behind. You were not ahead. You were on a road that only you were walking, toward an assignment that only you were built to carry. Type, I was never meant to fit. I was meant to carry. My child, I want to prepare you for the pace of what is coming because it will not match the pace of the season you are leaving. What once took years is about to happen in months. What once took months is about to move in weeks. What once cost you sweat and tears dragged out across long seasons of striving is about to arrive instead through alignment and obedience, at a speed that will surprise even you. This is not because you suddenly worked harder or found a better strategy. It is because the delays you experienced were never permanent features of your life. They were timing. And the timing has shifted. I did not hold you back to harm you, my child. I held the gates closed until your foundation could withstand what was coming through them. A door opened too early, before the foundation beneath it is solid, does not produce breakthrough. it produces collapse. So I waited. I held what needed to be held, and now, because the foundation is finally able to bear the weight, the gates are opening, and they are opening with a speed that will feel, to you and to everyone watching, like acceleration that defies natural explanation. You will step into appointments that feel like miracles, not because you orchestrated them, but because I positioned them. You will meet people who were assigned to build with you long before you ever crossed paths, and the connection will feel immediate, as though no introduction was even necessary. Doors will open with an ease that will make you question, at first, whether something is wrong, because you have spent so long associated with resistance that ease itself will feel unfamiliar. It is not wrong, it is correct. It is what happens when the foundation is finally ready and the gates I held closed are finally released. Revelation 3:8 says, "I have set before you an open door which no one is able to shut." My child, that door is not a future hope. It is a present reality, already standing open in front of you, waiting for you to walk through it without needing to force or manufacture what I have already prepared. I want to give you a way to recognize this acceleration when it begins to show up in your daily life. Because I do not want it to pass you by simply because it does not look the way you imagined breakthrough would look. It will not always announce itself with fanfare. Sometimes it will look like a conversation that happens to occur at exactly the right moment, with exactly the right person, producing exactly the connection you needed without either of you fully understanding why the timing worked out the way it did. Sometimes it will look like an obstacle that has been blocking you for months, simply resolving itself, not through your effort but through circumstances rearranging in your favor while you were focused on something else entirely. Sometimes it will look like an idea arriving fully formed, with a clarity that surprises you, as though it was deposited rather than generated. Watch for these things, my child. They are the acceleration becoming visible, and when you notice them, do not rush past them in pursuit of the next thing. Pause. Acknowledge what just happened. Receive it as what it is. Evidence that the gates have opened and the pace of your life has genuinely shifted. The temptation, when good things start moving quickly after a long season of slowness, is to become anxious that it will not last, to brace for the return of the old pace even while the new pace is actively unfolding around you. Resist that temptation. What I am releasing now is not a temporary acceleration that will revert once the momentum fades. It is the new pace of this season, sustained by the foundation that the hidden years built in you. Trust the speed. You built the foundation that can hold it. Type the acceleration has already begun. My child, I want to speak about the people who watched your hidden season and concluded, in their own minds, that you would stay hidden, who organized their understanding of you around the assumption that the resistance you faced would eventually wear you down, that the silence would eventually become permanent, that what they witnessed in your weakest moments was the full and final measure of who you were. They were not wrong about what they saw. You were genuinely weak in those moments. You were genuinely struggling, genuinely uncertain, genuinely far from the version of yourself you are stepping into now. Their error was not in observing the weakness. Their error was in believing it was the conclusion of your story, rather than a chapter inside a much longer one. And now they are watching the reward I am releasing over your life, and they cannot reconcile it with the version of you they decided was permanent. Some of them are recalculating quietly, revisiting conclusions they assumed were settled. Some are distancing themselves, uncomfortable with a version of you that no longer matches the role they assigned you in their understanding of how things were supposed to go. And some are doing what people often do when they cannot explain a shift they did not anticipate. They are looking for an explanation that does not require them to admit they underestimated what I was building. My daughter, you do not need them to understand it. You do not need their revised opinion of you to validate what I am doing. Their understanding was never the authority over your destiny. Mine was, and what I am releasing now was decided before they ever formed an opinion about you, before they ever watched you in your weakest moment and quietly wrote you off. Job 13:15 says, "Though he slay me, yet will I trust him." My child, that is the posture that produced this moment. Not the posture of someone who never struggled, but the posture of someone who kept trusting me even when trust made no logical sense. That trust is what unlocked what is being released now, and nothing they assumed about your limits can stop what has already been set in motion. Release what they assumed about you. It was never accurate, and it was never final. Let it go. You do not need to correct their understanding. The reward I am releasing will correct it for you. I also want to speak to something quieter, something underneath the visible underestimation, because I think it shaped you more than you have realized. Somewhere in the years of being misjudged, a part of you began to wonder if their assessment might actually be accurate. Not consciously, not in a way you would have said out loud, but in a low and persistent undertone that occasionally surfaced as self-doubt at inconvenient moments. What if they were right? What if this really was the full measure of who you were? What if the dreams I had placed in you were simply wishful thinking, the kind of thing struggling people tell themselves to survive a season, rather than an actual word about an actual future? My child, I want to address that undertone directly, because I do not want it to survive into the season that is opening now. They were not right, not partially right, not right about some smaller version of you while wrong about the larger one, wrong. Their assessment was formed from incomplete information, filtered through their own limitations, applied to a person they could only ever see the surface of. I saw what was underneath the surface. I saw it before you did, before they did, before anyone had the categories to name it. And what I saw is what is now being released. Let that undertone of doubt go along with everything else you are releasing in this moment. It was a survival mechanism for a season that has ended. You do not need it anymore. The reward replaces the doubt. Let it. Type, I release what they assumed about me. My child, you have stayed with me through this entire message, through every section, every word, every place where the truth pressed close enough to require something from you beyond passive listening. That staying matters, and I want to acknowledge it before this message closes. I also want to prepare you for what tries to arrive after a word like this lands. It will not come loudly. It will come quietly in the hours after you leave this message, in the form of very ordinary sounding doubt. It will suggest that what you just received was generic, meant for a wide audience, and not specifically for you. It will suggest that the acceleration I described sounds nice, but does not match your actual circumstances, which still look, on the surface, exactly the way they looked yesterday. It will try to convince you that nothing has actually changed, simply because the visible evidence has not yet caught up to what I have already released in the unseen. My child, when that thought comes, do not negotiate with it. Do not begin assembling reasons why this word might apply to other people but not fully to you. Simply return to what you know. I heard from God today. The reward was spoken specifically over my life. I do not need the visible evidence to arrive before I receive the word as true. The evidence is coming. The word came first. Nothing they assumed about your limits can stop what I have already released. Nothing the enemy whispers in the hours after this message can undo what was spoken here. What heaven declares, no opposition can cancel. I want to give you something practical to carry into the days right after this message, because words spoken over you matter most in how they are remembered after the moment of receiving them has passed. When the doubt comes, and it will come, do not try to out-argue it with elaborate reasoning. You do not need a sophisticated theological defense of why this word is true. You need a short, repeatable declaration that you can return to instantly, in the middle of a hard moment, without having to reconstruct an entire argument from scratch. Let this be the declaration I heard from God, and what He spoke is already true, whether or not I can see it yet. Say that to yourself when the circumstances have not changed, and the doubt suggests that nothing real happened today. Say it when an old relationship pattern tries to reassert itself and convince you that the resistance you used to face will simply return unchanged. Say it when exhaustion makes the whole message feel distant, like something you heard once and are no longer sure you actually believed. The declaration does not need to feel powerful in the moment you say it. It needs to be true, and it is true regardless of how it feels. This is the discipline of a child who has learned to trust the word over the feeling, the declaration over the circumstance, the unseen evidence over the visible delay. You are being trained, in this very moment, not just to receive a reward, but to carry it without losing it to the first wave of doubt that tries to dislodge it. Carry it well. I built it for you to keep, not to lose at the first inconvenience. Type, nothing can stop what God released. If this word reached you today, and something in your spirit has been confirming it from the very first sentence. I want to ask you for one more thing before you go. Sow a seed right now in this moment, while what I have spoken over you is still settling into your spirit. Not later, when the feeling has cooled and the urgency has passed now. This is not a suggestion to consider when convenient. This is an invitation to participate, in a real and tangible way, in the same kind of obedience that unlocked the reward I just described over your own life. Someone else is standing exactly where you stood a season ago, in the hidden place, wondering if the waiting will ever end. And your seed sown today is part of how this word reaches them at the exact hour they need it. Visit the link in the description below, or scan the QR code on screen, and sow now. Do not wait. Heaven is moving in this exact moment, and I am asking you to move with it. I want to say this one more time plainly because I do not want any ambiguity about how serious this invitation is. What you sow today is not measured by me in terms of size. It is measured in terms of obedience under the exact conditions you are in right now, today, with whatever you actually have available to you. Some of you reading this have more than enough and have been holding back out of habit rather than need. Some of you have very little and are being asked to give from that little, the way the widow gave from hers. Both responses matter to me. Neither is measured against the other. What matters is whether you respond to what I am asking of you in this specific moment, with what you actually have, instead of waiting for a future moment that may never arrive with conditions that feel more comfortable than today's. And before you leave, subscribe to this channel, my child. Stay positioned to receive what I continue to release in this season, because what was spoken over you today is not the only word prepared for you. There is more, and I want you here when it arrives. Psalm 112:2 says, "The generation of the upright will be blessed." My child, what is being released over you today is not only for you, it is reaching backward into the prayers spoken over you before you were born, and forward into a generation that has not yet seen what faithfulness like yours can produce. You were hidden with intention. You were loved in your enduring, not after it. You were resisted by people who felt your weight before you understood it yourself. And now, on a timeline I set before you were born, the reward the world has never seen is being released through your life. Not because you earned it through performance, but because you stayed faithful through the preparation. Carry this with you when you leave this message. Every part of your story that felt wasted was being recorded. Every part that felt delayed was being timed precisely, not carelessly. Every part that felt unfair was being weighed against an outcome you could not yet see. An outcome that justifies every hour of the wait, though it will not erase the difficulty of having lived through it. I do not ask you to pretend the hard seasons did not hurt. I ask you to let what hurt become the foundation of what is now being built, rather than the explanation for why you believe nothing good is coming. Something good is coming. It is not coming someday. In an abstract future you have to keep believing toward without evidence. It is coming now, in this season, beginning with what has already shifted in your spirit simply by receiving this word fully, without flinching away from it, without minimizing it, without assuming it must be meant for someone else. It was meant for you, every part of it. And what I release, I do not take back. Go in the fullness of what was spoken over you today. The hiding is over. The acceleration has begun. Type, "I receive the reward today." I am not finished with what I started in you.